May 8, 1945. In a gray dawn at Loch Arable, the sea is calm. Fog drifts across the Scottish coastline. From far out beyond the headlands comes a shape that once terrified the Atlantic. A slender hull rises, vents hiss, and a white flag appears on a conning tower. More shapes follow. U-boats are surrendering. The silent war beneath the waves is ending. The men aboard step out into the cold air and look up at Allied aircraft circling overhead. Their war is over. Their fate is unknown. Their vessels, once hidden hunters, are now prizes. In May and June 1945, this scene plays out in bays and fjord across Europe. At Trondheim and Bergen, at Lissahalli in Northern Ireland and Portsmouth in England, submarines surface like ghosts at the end of a nightmare. War diaries record more than 150 German boats that answered the call to cease operations. Their commanders bring them into foreign harbors, where British and American sailors come aboard, take their charts and postcards. None of the men know what will become of these machines. There is relief, there is shame, there is exhaustion. Under every periscope, there is a story. The global conflict has ended in Europe, yet the questions are only beginning. What will the victors do with hundreds of modern submarines lying at anchor? By the time Admiral Karl Donitz sent his final order, the U-boat fleet had changed the war's course. In 1940 and 1941, wolf packs sank convoys and starved Britain of supplies. Later, Allied code-breaking and air power turned the tide. But the boats still represented a leap in undersea technology. When they surfaced to surrender, engineers saw opportunity. The British wanted to study design details. The United States saw a chance to accelerate its own submarine program. The Soviet Union demanded its share. Meanwhile, Germany was broken and occupied. The men who had spent years beneath the surface now sat in internment camps, uncertain of their future. For the U-boat crews, the surrender brought a strange mix of emotions. Many had lost comrades. Some had been at sea for months. On land again, they faced interrogation, ration lines, and long waits. Soon they would be repatriated to a country that no longer existed as they had known it. Their steel boats, though, remained. The Allies found themselves guardians of a fleet they did not build and did not want to keep. What to do next? That question would lead to Operation Deadlight. Segment 2 begins in the damp summer of 1945. In Oslo, Bergen, and Kiel, surrendered boats fill piers. British naval planners estimate costs to moor, crew, and maintain each hull. The numbers are staggering. More than 150 boats need to be managed. Keeping them afloat would require crews, fuel, and dock space that Britain cannot spare. Storing them indefinitely is impractical and dangerous. There are also political concerns. The Allies have agreed that Germany's military capability must be dismantled. Allowing U-boats to rust away in local ports risks sabotage, escape attempts, or black market sale of equipment. The Americans and British discuss options. They can scrap the boats for steel. They can tow them out and sink them. They can donate some to museums. They can study the advanced types. But there is no unified plan yet. Then comes a decision. The Royal Navy approves Operation Deadlight. Its purpose is simple. Remove the captured U-boats from the equation. Tow them into deep water and send them to the bottom. Between November 1945 and February 1946, Deadlight will be executed in silence. It will erase most of Hitler's undersea fleet from the world map. The operation will take place off the coast of Northwest Ireland. There, in 3 dumping areas designated XX, YY, and ZZ, tugs will tow groups of submarines into the Atlantic. Once on site, Royal Navy destroyers and frigates will sink them by gunfire. It is a bureaucratic act of destruction, but it carries with it the weight of history. The very boats that once prowled convoys will vanish into the depths they exploited. Their loss will be quick, unsentimental, and in most cases, unrecorded on film. Only logbooks will mark the moment when a hull that once carried 40 men begins its final descent. The logistics are immense. 156 boats have surrendered. 116 are slated for destruction under Deadlight. The first phase begins as autumn storms gather. Royal Navy tugs depart from Loch Ryan, Lissahalli, and other ports, each pulling a gray hull whose hatches are welded shut. Many of the submarines are in terrible condition. Some were at sea for months without proper maintenance. Others were deliberately sabotaged by German crews to prevent their secrets from being seized. Their ballast tanks leak. Their hulls are weakened by rust. Engines that once ran silent now seize. As the tugs struggle against winter seas, the towed boats pitch and roll dangerously. In rough water, cables snap. Some submarines break loose and founder. The waves swallow them long before they reach the scuttling zone. 56 of the boats never make it. The Royal Navy notes each casualty. It is not attempt to save them. Deadlight's goal is to destroy, not rescue. Each lost boat reduces the workload. The ones that do reach the dumping grounds are given swift end. Destroyers open fire with their main guns. Rockets slam into conning towers. Naval crews set charges in the engine rooms and step away. Sea valves are opened. Water floods in. And within minutes, a boat that once stalked convoys disappears beneath the waves. Among them is U-2336, the last U-boat to sink Allied ships during the war. It surrenders in June 1945 and is towed out to sea in January 1946. Another, U-295, succumbs in December 1945 after being hauled from Loch Ryan. Each sinking has its own small story. For the men who watch from the decks of tugs and destroyers, there is a sense of closure. The threat that haunted the Atlantic shipping lanes for 6 years is being literally buried. There is also a melancholy recognition that technology and skill are being consigned to darkness. Some sailors wonder if future generations will ever know this happened. For decades, the world does not. Deadlight is a footnote in naval history. Those who participated seldom speak of it. The wrecks rest in peace until the 21st century, when maritime archaeologists locate them using sonar. The images they bring back show boats lying upright on the seabed, encrusted with marine life, their identities still legible. Operation Deadlight, once a secret, becomes part of collective memory. Meanwhile, not all boats go to the bottom. The most advanced types, the Type XXI and Type XEI submarines, receive special consideration. These represent a revolution in underwater design. Unlike earlier boats, which were essentially surface ships that could submerge briefly, the Type XXI is built for sustained submerged operation. Its streamlined hull reduces drag. Its batteries are larger, allowing extended underwater cruising. It has a snorkel to draw air without surfacing. Some can reach 17 knots underwater, far faster than previous designs. The Allies recognize these innovations as the future of submarine warfare. Rather than sink them, they allocate them for study. British, American, and Soviet engineers each want examples. The Tripartite Naval Commission, established in August 1945, oversees the distribution. It assigns 10 U-boats to the United Kingdom, 10 to the United States, and 10 to the Soviet Union. Additional units go to France and other smaller navies for testing. Each receiving nation selects boats from the surrendered fleet, focusing on the advanced models. While Operation Deadlight sends hulls to the bottom, a parallel operation ships hulls to Portsmouth, New London, Gdansk, Brest, and Leningrad for disassembly and trials. In this way, the U-boats become seeds of future fleets. The British incorporate several Type XXI boats into their research program. U-3017 becomes HMS N41 for a time. Engineers run submerged endurance trials and evaluate the snorkel system. After a few years, they scrap the boat, but the lessons influence the design of the Royal Navy's Porpoise-class submarines in the 1950s. Canada takes U-190, renames it HMCS Mackenzie for training, and uses it as a sonar target. British crews drop depth charges near German steel to refine anti-submarine tactics. The United States brings several U-boats to its bases at Portsmouth and New London. American officers study the propulsion systems, battery arrangements, and periscope design. They examine silent running technologies and hull hydrodynamics. U-234, a cargo submarine captured en route to Japan, carrying uranium oxide and jet components, undergoes detailed inspection. In 1947, the U.S. Navy uses it for weapons tests and sinks it. These experiments shape the design of America's tank class and then its first nuclear boats. Across the Atlantic, French engineers take possession of some boats. Norway and Denmark operate a few for training. But it is the Soviet Union that obtains perhaps the most important trove. Soviet shipyards disassemble the German Type XXI boats plate by plate. They replicate hull shapes, battery layouts, and snorkel systems. The resulting Whiskey-class submarines, built in the late 1940s and early 1950s, are direct descendants of German engineering. For the West, this is a sobering development. The same design that menaced convoys now underpins a fleet that will challenge NATO in the North Atlantic and under the Arctic ice. The Cold War Navy is taking shape. By 1949, most of the retained boats have served their research purpose and are scrapped. Yet their influence lives on. The Type XXI's hull shape influences every conventional submarine built for the next 2 decades. Its hydrodynamics inform the first nuclear submarines. Its battery capacity points the way toward the submarine as a true underwater craft. In this way, the last invention of the Kriegsmarine becomes the foundation of post-war fleets. The Allied navies of the 1950s owe more to German wartime innovation than is often acknowledged. The phrase Cold War Navy describes not just the nuclear-armed giants of later decades, but also the conventional boats derived from captured German designs. That technological thread runs from the dark fjords of Norway, through Portsmouth to Groton, and on to Murmansk. It is a reminder that war destroys, but also disseminates knowledge. The human story of the U-boats does not end with technology. Some hulls escape destruction and become monuments. These survivors are scattered across Europe and North America. U-995 is among the most famous. After surrendering at Trondheim, it serves briefly in the Norwegian Navy. In 1965, it returns to Germany, where it is preserved at Lebow near Kiel as a museum. Visitors walk through its cramped interior, see the bunks stacked 3 high, and imagine 45 men sharing this metal tube. They hear the hum of recorded diesel engines and consider the terror of depth charges. In France, U-123 becomes Blazon and continues to serve after the war before being preserved in Lorient. U-534, raised from the Kattegat Strait in 1993, now sits in Birkenhead, England, its hull cut open to reveal compartments. In Chicago, U-505 stands in the Museum of Science and Industry. Captured intact in June 1944 after being forced to the surface, it provides an American audience with a tangible link to the Battle of the Atlantic. Thousands file past its gray hull each year. They see the swastika still painted on the conning tower and the torpedo tubes that once hunted their ships. Museums in Hamburg and Kiel house additional exhibits. Each boat is not just a machine, but a memorial. They preserve the memory of more than 30,000 German submariners who never returned. They also honor the Allied sailors and merchant crews lost in the convoy battles. Steel has become symbol. Below the water, there's another memorial. The wrecks of Operation Deadlight rest in silence on the seabed northwest of Ireland. For decades, they were forgotten. Only a handful of fishermen knew of them. In the early 2000s, maritime archaeologists mapped the graveyard. Sonar images show hulls lying upright or canted on their sides, silt covering their decks. In some, hatches are still closed and periscopes remain raised. Their steel is slowly consumed by salt water, yet their outlines are clear. These underwater wrecks form one of the world's largest submerged graveyards. They attract divers and historians. They remind us that the end of a war is not clean. Machines are not simply switched off. They're disposed of, buried, or turned into monuments. The Deadlight wrecks bear witness to a deliberate act of erasure that has, over time, given rise to fascination. The phrase underwater wrecks appears in guidebooks, drawing attention to the site. Each dive is an encounter with history. Each hull is a question about memory and forgetting. In the final segment, we return to the big picture. The fate of the U-boats after World War II is more than a list of sinkings and scrapings. It is a story about endings and beginnings. The surrender of 1945 marked the collapse of a force that once threatened to starve nations. Operation Deadlight represented an attempt to erase that force physically. Yet the destruction was partial. Technology survived, ideas migrated, and a handful of boats became museums. The Cold War Navy that followed took shape in part from these lessons. The captured boats influenced designs in the East and West. The survivors became symbols of a brutal conflict at sea. The wrecks below the Atlantic became a haunting underwater landscape. When we think about WW2 submarines and German U-boats, we often imagine epic convoy battles or daring escapes. We seldom think about what happened after the war ended. Yet that aftermath is important. It shows how quickly hardware can move from terror to trash, from secret to blueprint, from weapon to artifact. It shows how the sea accepts everything, swallowing both triumph and defeat. It underscores that the line between past and present is measured in rust and salt. There is a philosophical lesson. War makes things and then unmakes them. Men build machines with one purpose. Those machines serve, then they are scuttled or scrapped. But knowledge does not sink. It persists in plans and patents, in engineers' minds, in Navy's archives. The Type XXI's hull shape will live on long after the boat itself corrodes. The snorkel will inspire designs decades later. The feeling of claustrophobia inside U-505 will be felt by museum visitors who were not yet born when those engines last ran. History echoes in steel and water. When we walk through U-995 or see sonar images of deadlight wrecks, we connect across time. We remember the sailors who went to sea and never returned. We understand that even in defeat, technology can influence the future. And we see that the sea remains indifferent. It conceals and preserves, erodes and reveals. In the end, the greatest victories come not from firepower, but from understanding. The understanding that emerges when the guns are silent and the waves close over the past. The U-boats that surrendered in 1945 became part of this cycle. Their demise was deliberate. Their legacy was unintended. Their story continues beneath the waves and inside museums, between history and the sea.